All right, guys, let's get into it. So my name is Joe. I'm the design advocate here at Lyssna. I've been a researcher and a product designer for about the past, 10 to 15 years, somewhere in there. Most importantly, my goal for any workshop or training that I'm leading, including today's, is for you guys to leave with some real tangible skills. And I think maybe more or as important, the confidence to put the stuff that we go through here into your day-to-day work. Good to get some concepts and learn some new things and have some new knowledge about the topic. Nothing wrong with that, but I want to make sure that in every workshop, I come away with more than that and really some things that you are excited about putting into practice, the confidence and the tools to do. Today, we have a great tool. I'm not going to say it's great. You guys can tell me the quality of it, but we have what I believe a really useful tool that I built to go through in our workshop today. So you'll have some good stuff to take away from that. So at the end of the workshop, just to make sure I'm doing my job, I'll ask you these two questions. Did you enjoy the workshop? Hopefully it's an enjoyable hour and productive use of your time and feels smooth and goes fast. But more importantly, do you feel more confident, not to choose sample sizes, wrong copy there, but to calculate, understand, and communicate the ROI and the impact of research than you did right now? So I'll follow up at the end and see how we did there. Awesome. Let's get into it. So today's workshop topic is about making a business case, calculating, understanding, communicating the ROI, the return on investment of UX research. And this is, as many of you probably already know, whether you have developed strategies to do this, whether this is something you've actively tried to wrap your head around, get back communicating. I'm sure everybody here has experienced the challenge of not only calculating, but communicating the value of UX research in general. If you have ever suggested a research initiative to your team and maybe got some pushback or some skepticism or some, yeah, that sounds good, but nothing ever leads to any action there, then you've experienced kind of the core of what we're talking about in this workshop, which is the fact that us as product designers and researchers, we understand that the most fundamental part of building a good product or a new feature or whatever you're working on is to understand your users, their needs, their pain points, their preferences, and use that. We understand how important that is, but that can often be more challenging to communicate. And when we get to a business case in terms of making a budget, making time for research, dedicating resources to it, that involves kind of buying it and really setting that value in black and white, which can be an even more challenging thing to do with something like UX research that can feel a little bit vague or maybe lead in several other directions. So today with our workshop, I'm going to bring the tool up in just a little bit, but we'll start with just framing some of this stuff and some of the challenges around it. And I'm going to show you a process and a tool to make that a little bit more clear, to go beyond just saying, hey, it's important that we do research here. It's important that we test this out, and get into the actual dollars and cents, time commitments, decisions, risk, and impact in a way that really lays it out clearly, as opposed to just a vague thing that we should do. So let me show you. I could give a million examples of this in my career in the client projects that I've worked on. This is not an actual screenshot from a project, but it was close enough, so I put it in here as a mock-up. One project that comes to mind that I worked on years ago, one that I use as an example a lot, was a test prep app that I created, that I was hired to work on, prototype, and really design from scratch. And it was a test prep app for the GRE and GMATs. So I don't know if anyone here has taken those tests to apply to a grad school, at least in the US. I'm not sure where else. I've never taken it, but I've seen the questions and I would not do very well on it. Anyway, this app that I was working on was a way for students who were taking the GRE and GMAT to study for it, to improve their scores and to optimize the stuff that they're working on. Early on in this process, we started maybe bigger. We broke off a little bit more than we could chew at the beginning. But fast forwarding to this point, I'd say a couple months into the project, we had a really robust prototype. Sorry for the sirens out there. A really robust prototype that involved a lot of different flows of taking a practice test, getting your results, seeing areas to improve. These were all prototyped and not functional, but it was starting to get big, right? We were building a lot of stuff, or designing and prototyping stuff, building on top of other features. And long story short, I got to this point working on it a couple months in, where I was really feeling like, hey, client, maybe we should test this out. We're making a lot of decisions. Maybe we could just do a couple usability tests. Hey, do you guys think we could run a quick study here? Could we put this in front of a couple students and see what they think about this project test? I'm trying to ease into that, but after a while, really got to the point where I'm thinking we need to put this in front of people. And this kind of summarizes what I was saying before, a good example of this kind of uphill battle, or the challenges involved in doing research and in quantifying or expressing the value of it in a way that's going to resonate. We did end up testing it, but I had to do a lot of stuff on the side, guerrilla studies, things that might have been a little harder for me to get approval on, but things that absolutely needed to be tested and put in front of people to make the right decisions. I'm sure everyone here has probably experienced that in some way, that pushback, or that, hey, we should really test this before we build anything. And I think it's pretty interesting, because if you think of really like any other product area outside of apps and web apps and digital stuff that we're working on, they're testing all the time. It seems like a no-brainer. It doesn't really seem like something you have to fight for. If you're Nike and you're designing a new technology for a running sneaker, and you're putting all this money and time into it, and hiring designers, all the stuff that, not to the same level, but that this test prep company was doing, wouldn't you want a few people to go for a run in them before mass producing it or sending the specs off to a factory to create a couple million of these sneakers? Of course, right? And that's what, for physical products, there's a difference. Once you build it, we can iterate on digital products. Not as easy to do that after your 100,000 pairs of new running sneakers are created. But the idea is, this is known value in a lot of other areas, but more difficult to articulate and get buy-in on and convince stakeholders of the value when it comes to the type of stuff that we're working on. But why research buy-in is often an uphill battle, I think there could be a lot of reasons for this, but in my experience, these are the big three. These are the factors that make it difficult to get those resources, that time, that budget, that buy-in on doing research or testing out a test prep app that you've been working on for a couple months without any feedback. If you guys have got any more to add to this, I'll go through these real quick, but if you've got any more, I would love to hear them in the chat. Or if you've experienced any of these as I'm going through them, let me know that I'm not alone. Okay, so the big three: it feels like a slowdown. 2, the impact shows up too late. And the ROI, the return on investment, the value of that research from a business perspective, feels vague and a little fuzzy. Okay, so let's look at the first one. It feels like a slowdown. I got a cartoon here from, in my opinion, one of the best fundamental user research books, Talking to Humans or Talking with Humans, by Tom Fishburne. There are a lot of comics in this one. As a UX researcher, you might find some entertainment in them, maybe not for the mainstream. But I think this sums it up well, and is an attitude that I've faced, or pushback I've faced often, which is that doing research feels like a speed bump, right? The perception is that it's a pause on progress. If we're talking to people, if we're running interviews, if we're doing all this stuff, we're not shipping things. We're not designing new stuff. We're not pushing updates to our app. We're not making stuff. We're not creating output. Now, as we know, that output and those new features or screens, they're not valuable if we haven't validated that people want them and that our users care about them or they solve a problem. But oftentimes with stakeholders, that can be the source of the pushback, right? Second one, the impact shows up too late. And I would say this is like the impact of not doing research shows up too late. Let's say we build this test prep platform. We never test it out. We don't really do any research on it. In our minds, not mine, but maybe in the team's mind, it's all good, right? We're not asking for any feedback, so we're not getting any negative feedback. We're producing stuff, we're adding features, we're prototyping things. It's starting to look like a real app. Everything is going well on the surface. And then you launch it, you put it out there, and maybe a couple months later, if it's in the App Store, you see something like this where you got an average 2.8 or a low rating, or you start getting feedback months later. That is usually the root cause of that is from that lack of research. Now, this is really starting to have a business impact on your product. Your stakeholders who might have denied that research, they're going to care if your app is a 2.8 out of 5 after a couple months. But as researchers, it can be hard to get that told you so moment where we say, hey, we should research this. And honestly, at that point, it can be too late. So in a lot of cases, it's easy to push off the dedicating resources to research and time and budget to it. And it can be difficult to connect failures in the future to not doing research. It can just be too far removed and a lot of other factors that can come into play. The last one here, the investment and the return on research feels vague, right? Going back to the Nike shoe example and the difference between digital products and a more, I don't want to say straightforward or a physical brick and mortar location or business, there's a difference. The investment and return feel vague. Stakeholders might not be really sure of the investment decision, the return, the risk, the real scope of what is going into this product, what the research can prove or validate or invalidate, and how to quantify that or factor it in to a new product decision. I use this one as an example. If you have an ice cream shop, right, and you're buying a new ice cream machine and you're calculating the ROI, you can get the cost of the machine, the output increase, how many more ice creams can you make with this thing? You can get your revenue uplift and get a pretty simple calculation of your return on investment of this $5,000 ice cream machine. It's straightforward, it's clear. With digital products and the amount of iteration, updates, moving parts of them, it's not always this straightforward. But that doesn't have to be an excuse to just completely ignore it. And what we're going to go through here is how to take that value, that ROI that might be vague or that might be a little fuzzy to stakeholders to quantify and factor into a decision, and try to get it into something a little bit more like this. I wish I could get it to a point where it's this simple, but to try to move it in that direction. So we've got these 3 factors into why research buy-in and understanding the ROI and the value of research can be an uphill battle. I think the third one, or the fourth one, let's say, and maybe the biggest one, is blissful ignorance. I think there's definitely a factor. If you're cranking out new features, building stuff, everything's looking good, you're making bets that this product is going to work, that it's going to deliver value, that people are going to pay for it, right? That is going to, sorry, I got a train behind me. That is, the deeper you get into that, the harder it might be to test that out and maybe accept the fact that it's not, or that the direction that you're going 100 miles an hour in is not the right one. We've got these more specific factors, but I do think this is a simple one, kind of confirmation bias or the ignorance is bliss kind of approach. Simple, but one that I do think factors in quite a bit to that pushback and the challenges that we have as researchers to really articulate the value of it. Let me know in the chat if you've been on a project with stakeholders who were scared to open Pandora's box when it comes to UX research. I definitely have. All right, so let's get into our tool for the rest of the workshop. So I created a research ROI calculator, impact calculator kind of thing. We're going to walk through it together in just a second. But the goal of it is to overcome some of those challenges that I just laid out, to overcome some of that pushback, maybe from stakeholders when you are trying to make a clear business case for research. Having a fuzzy understanding of the return, not really a clear understanding of the investment, those things are going to make it hard to make a business case for research. But we're going to walk through how to improve that. So I'll pull up the tool in a sec, but I just wanted to call out the fact that there are some other research ROI calculators out there, and there are some good ones. This one I have in the back is, I believe, from User Interviews, and it's a tool I've worked through a few times, and it's pretty good, right? You can put a lot of details about the investment going into, let's say, building a new feature, the development hours, the time for the research, the estimated business impact in terms of how that will affect revenue, subscriptions, churn rate. There's a lot you can do in it, and certainly a good tool. And there are several others like it. What I struggled with this tool and why I haven't used these as much in my own design work and in actually trying to articulate the ROI of research is because I found they're most useful if you really have all of the numbers, if you really have an accurate scope on exactly how much time, how many development hours, how many design hours are going into this new feature, costs of everything. If you have all that information, these can be extremely useful to really getting that black and white return on investment of research initiatives and how that'll affect the product that you're designing and the opportunity you have in front of you. But what I've noticed, and my experience at least, is that's not always the case. You don't always have the hard numbers to go into it. You don't always have a clear, exact, certain scope on what it's going to take to build something. That stuff can be flexible, that can change over time. So without that, it comes back to the original problem of not really having the inputs to be able to communicate and calculate this ROI. So the one that I created is more about covering everything, not just what you can quantify. And I think of it more of less of a calculator tool, although it is, and more of a tool to evaluate, a collaborative tool to lay out all of the factors in a product decision and then see how research can de-risk a decision, how research can help guide you to a successful product decision or a successful new feature, and really how often the cost of research, especially with stuff like Lyssna, is small potatoes in comparison to the amount of investment that goes into even a pretty simple new feature. So it's about clarity, and we'll walk through so I'll just skip through that there. Okay, so let's get into it. Our project, I created a demo example here that we're going to use the tool for, kind of work through together. As I said earlier, I'm going to call out to you guys in the chat to contribute to this. Pretty much I want to run this as if we're a team of, designers, researchers, stakeholders, product managers, people who are making decisions about what to build next and the direction of a project, and use this tool to go from suggesting or advocating generally for research and more into getting into the exact cost, opportunities, and ways to de-risk it that research offers. So the example we're going to use is a real company here, one that I've been using recently, so it's top of mind for me. Peerspace. Peerspace is a platform to basically rent spaces for a day, a couple hours. They have a lot of things like photography studios. If you're a food influencer and want to shoot a video, you can find a cool kitchen on Peerspace. I record some of my videos here. I don't know if anyone's used this before, but think of it as like an Airbnb for daily studio specialty spaces, event hosting that you can browse and book online. So we're going to pretend that we're the team for Peerspace. And here's the specific feature or initiative that we're going to be working through. It's a bulk credit option. So without giving too much background, let's say that this idea comes up. Maybe we see that people are often booking the same space over and over. Maybe every Wednesday they record their podcast and book the same podcast studio. And we see an opportunity, let's say, for a feature like bulk credits, right? Instead of just paying a single booking cost and paying the same over and over, maybe we can offer a feature where someone can buy bulk credits to book spaces. They can save and get a little discount on those credits. And as a business, we can increase revenue. People are spending more per transaction, maybe reduce churn. If people have credits in their account, maybe the idea is they're going to be more likely to come back and book another space or use those credits. We could think of some other business goals. Maybe it's more reliable income for our space hosts if they're not just getting one-off bookings, but see that someone has bought a bulk amount of hours or time to book at their space. So we'll get into some of the more specifics, but let's just say this feature comes up as a possible opportunity. We're going to say, let's build this thing or let's explore this thing. And we're advocating for research behind it. We want to not just dive into building it and putting it out there, but propose doing some research to test this out before the train is on the tracks, and more importantly, clearly articulate why that research is not going to be a slowdown, why it's actually going to be an important factor to make sure we get this right, and to quantify the investment, the cost that we're putting into this, and seeing how testing can give us a better chance at succeeding in some of these business goals. Okay, so kind of covered this already, but how we might typically plead our case is saying, hey, we should do research on this. We got this feature that we're going to launch, the bulk credits. We should test it out first, like my test prep one, right? Hey guys, we should test this. What do you think? Hey, we've built a lot. We should put this in front of some people. I'm sure you guys have a better strategy than that, but in general, that can be the approach, right? We should test this. Why? We want to make sure it works. We want to make sure people like it. All true, but not as compelling as looking at the really quantifying and factoring in everything that goes into it, the possible opportunities, and the real return on investment that research can provide. Okay, so let's build a better version of this together. I'm going to share this link to my calculator. While I pull this up, I'm going to check the chat, but let me know if you guys have any questions, stuff you want to share. I'll get to those, and then we're going to spend the rest of our workshop going through the tool together. Let's see, Melody said, agree. Sometimes my clients have been scared of bothering their customers or of the perception of research talking to customer cast on not knowing what they're, oh, that's a pretty interesting one. I'm trying to think if I've ever, so the idea, Melody, thanks for sharing that. So the idea is, hey, if we ask them what they want, they're going to doubt our expertise, our product building prowess, our understanding of them. That's a frustrating one, actually. I don't think I've ever really come across that where clients been like worried about the perception. That is definitely like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's no, we don't want them to know that we don't know what we're doing, but we don't know what we're doing. We can't ask them because we don't want them to know that. Has anyone else come across that? That's an interesting one. I might have to add that as a sub note for the next time we run this workshop, especially because, as we all know, the best products are not the people who know what they're doing and know what to build, and the teams that know what to do because they're asking people and learning from their users. This is in the public sector for context. That is a big factor too. Interesting. That's a good one, Melody. hopefully this will be a tool to help you with that and help you get over that. But that is interesting. In the public sector, I can see that being more of a factor where there's an implicit level of, trust, dependency on systems and teams that they know what they're doing and building, more so maybe than a little startup who's just getting off the ground. Thanks for sharing that, Melody. All right, so check this out, guys. I'm going to share this link in the chat. This is my initial prototype for kind of my version of a research calculator, or I'd say a better way to say it is a research impact calculator, maybe more so than the ROI. You guys have the link. You can start it off on, you can see the experience with like onboarding and stuff like that. But I've already put some data in here for my screen for this Peerspace example. So I'm going to continue where I left off, and we're going to walk through this together. Let me see. Tessa said, I always get we don't have to overpromise, underdeliver. If we send a prototype testing and end up pivoting on the scope of the feature, but we end up doing that anyway if the feature doesn't meet their exact needs because we didn't test it first. We don't have to overpromise, underdeliver. End up pivoting on the scope of the feature. Yeah, so it comes back to, let's say, but we end up doing that anyway. Yeah, it's like a roundabout path. That's good that if you end up doing it anyway, Tessa, if you eventually come back to, hey, this isn't working, let's pivot this, that's good. That's better than just like staying the course. The frustrating thing there is that takes more time and more failure to get there, right? Those are things that as researchers know, you could learn more quickly. If I'm understanding your comment correctly, those are things that could be figured out more early on, as opposed to waiting for it to get to a point where it's like, okay, we really need to fix this. Again, all things I'm describing, I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys all know this as researchers, right? But this can be the challenge to articulate that and really clearly lay out like, hey, here's what's going into this. Here's how research is going to help us succeed, let's say the first time on it. Cool. All right. So let me walk through what I built here with you guys, and we'll go through our Peerspace example and our role and our assignment here to advocate for research from a business perspective, and specifically for this feature that I introduced of a bulk credit pack. Okay, so I put this stuff in already just to speed things up a little bit here, but we're going to walk through this step by step. Basically, this tool is offers a way to get some context about your company and your product, the initiative that you're considering, in this case, the feature that we're considering building, bulk hour credit pack system for repeat guests, some of the goals that we're trying to achieve, in this case, increasing revenue per repeat guest, reducing churn, and some success metrics. How would we know if this worked? So if you go to let me just pop open a new tab here. I'll share this. So if you start from scratch here, this tool will give you some quick ways to gather this context using a little bit of AI magic. Some stuff might be broken here as well, but the idea is you can plug in some details, you can get a summary, important context about your product. You can say the bulk hour stuff. So here we're describing what is this initiative. In this case, what's this feature that the train's on the tracks to build? Churn, revenue growth. Let's not say user acquisition. And this is all just gathering context about this decision. If we're going to make a business case for research, then and this tool that we're using has to have a scope of what we're trying to achieve, what our business is about, and what decision we're making or what feature we're considering building that we're going to use research as a way to do more successfully or to articulate the ROI on. So you guys can go through this on your own. It's an onboarding process, but I just wanted to show you how I got to this section. Oh my gosh, this train is crazy, guys. Sorry. All right, let me share this again. Okay, so after going through that, we've got let's get out of this. There we go. Okay, so once you plug all that stuff in this tool, we've got the context here. So looking at ours for our Peerspace one, we've got what Peerspace is. We've got our initiative or our feature, launch a bulk hour credit system. We've got our goals, what we want to achieve by doing this, things we already covered, reducing churn, improving host predictability, success metrics. How are we going to know if this worked, right? What are the revenue goals that we're trying to hit, the conversion goals, all things that you can factor into just about any product decision. You can see it now. Got it. Cool. So let's go follow along just with my screen here. Make sure I'm sharing this the right way. Okay, so we've got our initiative and our context set up. In order to effectively understand the ROI of research, in order to effectively communicate how research is going to be a cost-effective way to de-risk this, to increase our chance of success. In order to do that and make our business case for research and dedicating time, resources, and budget to it, we have to understand a few more things. In this case, our opportunities, our costs, and some assumptions. So I've got some in here already, but we're going to go through this one by one. Let's start with opportunities. We're talking about this decision to build a bulk credit feature, a way that people can buy bulk hours to rebook spaces at a discount on Peerspace. If we were all working together in the same room as a team, this is something we could pull up to get that list down, get this on paper, let's say, and really present all of the possible opportunities that are going to factor into this decision and that are going to factor into determining the value of research in it. So I've got a couple in here. What are some of the opportunities of doing this? It could be an upfront revenue boost. Now, in this example here, if you've got the hard numbers, right, and you say, hey, at best, our opportunity for launching this, if we do this successfully and launch this bulk credit feature, we could project $340K in Q3 at this attach rate. So I want to add some examples here where, let's say you do have good numbers or projections on it. But we can add, it's flexible, right? So the idea of this tool is you don't have to know all of the numbers or projections for an opportunity. You could do things a little bit more loosely. So I'm going to put an opportunity in here, and let's say, I'm going to take this one out. Let's say more predictable revenue for hosts. This is an opportunity. If we launch this bulk credit feature, it might be more predictable revenue for hosts, less churn for them. So people who are hosting, who own a studio that they're renting out on Peerspace, maybe we can say an opportunity is that they have more steady and predictable income. And the value of this, even if we can't calculate this, we can say something like lower churn rate for hosts, maybe even higher monthly average income for hosts. So the idea here, and you can look at these tooltips, is if this lands, right? If this feature, this bulk credit feature does what we think it's going to do, or whatever feature you guys are evaluating or decision you're evaluating, if it does what we think it's going to do, what are the opportunities? If we have real numbers that we can project, that's great. That's going to help make it more specific. If not, we can just get it down loosely, right? Just make sure that it's factored in. And then down here, we can add the impact. How much would this move the needle if it works? A light estimation on this one, right? If this feature can provide more predictable revenue for hosts and there's less churn, how much is that going to roughly impact our business? I say for this one, let's say high, right? This is if we can make sure that hosts are making more money, they have more predictable income, they're continuing to host their studios on Peerspace and not canceling their account. Let's say that's a big impact for our business. Again, totally making this up with the example, but we're adding this into the list and starting to take stock of what's possible with this decision. Okay, before we move on to costs, I'll show you a couple other things I built into this. Some brief AI suggestions. Now, these are not meant to take like right as is, but my idea was to give you some ideas. If you're going into this with your team or a stakeholder and you're trying to really take stock of all of the opportunities that go into a decision, some of these suggestions might help you think about some opportunities you haven't identified yet or some directions to think about it. The other thing is this ideas section, which we'll see on the other tabs as well. Again, not meant to use like one-to-one or not meant to directly apply to your product or your feature, but more to get you thinking about some of the possible opportunities here, right? Increased conversion. Are people going to be booking at a higher rate if we have this bulk credit feature? Is it easier to re-engage people? Hey, you get an email, you have 8 credits left in your Peerspace account, want to book a private office or a space this week. So the idea here is to get you guys and start the conversation and make sure you're really covering everything, opportunities or otherwise, that's going into this feature decision. Okay, so let's stick with these ones here. These are our big opportunities: increased lifetime value, repeat guest retention, upfront revenue boost, and more predictable revenue for hosts. The idea here would be to go through this with your team, get these down, even if not totally specific, and make sure that you're really factoring everything in to your decision. All right, let's go to costs. And I'm going to ask you guys to help me fill this one out a little bit more. So costs looks really similar to opportunities, basically a big list of what is going into this initiative, in this case, building, launching, going live with our bulk credits feature. So just like the other ones, we've got some ideas here, right? What are the costs that are going to go into it? What are the different areas that are going to be required? If you've scored a design sprint or a development sprint, something like that, is the gist of this part. Again, less about the specific dollars and cents, although I do have a couple of those in here, more about taking stock, now that you've done the opportunities, taking stock of the cost of building this feature. Let me give you guys a minute here. I'll leave my screen up. Given the example that we've started with, I'll put a couple minutes on the clock. Drop a cost in the chat. Knowing what you know about this initiative to build a bulk credit feature, what is something we want to account for in terms of cost? Now, as you think about this, don't just think about money, dollars and cents that go into it. Although if you have something like that, drop it in. Think about time, right? Think about things that are going to need to be created or changed, resources. So I'm using cost in a more general sense here. I think the best way to think of it is what is going to go into launching this bulk credit feature. So let me give you guys a minute, think about it, and give me one example, one light example, let's say, of something that you would expect needs to happen, something that needs to go into this general cost of building this feature for Peerspace. And I'll leave this up here so you can check out, maybe get some of the ideas for the examples. Nice. All right, so let's see. Lots of meetings. That is the biggest cost of all. Yeah, time that you're sitting. That's a good one. Yeah, lots of meetings. And honestly, that's something you could put in here, right? Like weekly update, sync up meeting, estimate 20, I'll say employee hours per week, something like that, right? Now the effort or cost here, we could say that's like maybe low, medium compared to other stuff or like development costs or something like that. But yes, I love that because it's a good example, but also one that I would be adding into here, right? Now, we might not have the exact calculation of that, but we're saying, hey, we're going to do a meeting once a week to do a design review on this, to talk about testing. We're going to have 5 people involved in this. Hey, that's a cost, right? That's time that employees are dedicating to this feature. So even if we don't have the exact hourly breakdown, that is an important thing to factor in to this decision and whether or not you're going to do research. See some other ones. Post-release hot fixes, rolling out the feature back if it doesn't land. Yes, we're going to see some of that with the assumptions test. Stakeholder interview, churn on decisions, good. Development time, absolutely. QA and testing, marketing campaigns, good. These are great examples here of thinking about the other stuff that goes into it. It's easy to overlook, and it's easy for stakeholders to overlook that stuff. But if we want to make a strong case for research, we want to really present a clear view of what's going into this. Hey, we're going to spend $1 million and 500 hours on this. That might make it a little bit more compelling to test it out before we go live. So great ideas in the chat. One that I just thought of is updating FAQ articles or like help-based articles. I don't know, 20 hours, again, totally making this up, but these are the things that are important to have in here. That one might not have got added in. Yeah, it did. Good. Okay, let's go to our last section here with assumptions. Same setup here, same idea. We've got now our opportunity, we've got our initiative, we've got our opportunities and what we can hope to achieve if this goes right. We've got a comprehensive view of our costs, whether they're all in dollars and cents or not is not as important, but the fact that we've got them all listed there, we're starting to build a clearer picture of this initiative of building this feature. And by doing that, building a clearer picture of the return on investment and the role that research can play in it. We get to this last one, which I'd say is probably the most important, our assumptions, right? If we're going to be successful with this feature, if it's going to help us do all of these things and make all this money and improve all this stuff that we listed out here, we got to talk about what assumptions we're making, what needs to go right for that to happen. So let's put an example in here. I think I have this maybe, but say our assumption is that a 15% discount or whatever, our proposed discount is compelling enough for people to buy bulk hours. Maybe we're making an assumption, hey, we're going to do 15% off if you book this many hours. Sounds good on paper, but is this discount actually compelling enough for people to spend $1,000 on credits instead of $100 for just the day or the booking that they need? We could have the impact of this assumption if we're right. How make or break is this? Say it's high. And our confidence in it, unknown, is we have no idea, right? A hunch, maybe we have some anecdotal data or some signals that this might be the right number for it. Plausible, proven. If it's proven, we've tested this before, we know that this discount is better than any other discounts we're offering. We've launched an initiative like this before. We've done research on it. And then our basis here. So let's say this one's an unknown or like a hunch, and we'll say 15% discounts have performed relatively well in past comparable initiatives. Kind of some corporate BS there, but that's a lot of times what happens in these meetings. So we're saying like, hey, this is an assumption that we have to get right. Is it important? Yeah, it's high. We have to make sure this discount actually is compelling or no one's going to care about the feature. And none of these opportunities are going to come to fruition. How sure are we that this is the right discount? A little bit. We've done stuff like this in the past, not the exact same thing, but we'll say it's not a complete unknown, but it's there. Now, the most important part about this, sorry, I know we're almost up on time, guys, but we'll wrap and get to the report and a super quick wrap up in a sec. But what I want to share for these assumptions, and really for all of these, but I think most notable with the assumptions, is the intention behind this tool is not to necessarily measure everything exactly or down to dollars and cents, but to start the conversations of what goes into a product decision, right? So if we're saying, it's easy for a stakeholder to say in a meeting, oh yeah, we know that 15% is a good enough discount. We know people are going to go for that. They're going to book 8 hours or buy bulk hours with that discount. If a stakeholder says that in a meeting with 15 people on Zoom, that might be harder to challenge, right? That might just be taken as an assumption that's proven and that we can go forward with. But if you're working through something like this together or with your team and actually have to get it down and like written, that's a much better opportunity and environment to really get real with this, right? So in this case, if a stakeholder says, how confident are we? And they say, oh, it's proven, we know that's going to work. What's the basis? Have we done research? No, but we did something similar in the past. Okay, maybe it's more of a hunch, right? And that collaborative aspect, way more important in listing out what goes into a decision, the opportunities, the cost, the assumptions, and getting real, not just about the dollars and cents, but about where you stand and your risk or confidence related to this decision. So you might not have stakeholders who are willing to go through this with you, but was my intention in building this, is to create an environment for those discussions and to really force everyone on your team or anyone involved in a decision to be able to back up their claims with proof, right? If you're saying, we know this assumption is true and we know it's gonna work, how do you know that, right? If we're not doing that, then we can't really get a clear view of the risk and opportunity here. All right, let me check the chat. Give me another assumption, guys. We're gonna take 5 more minutes, so appreciate you guys if you're staying a little bit longer, but let me give you a minute. Give me an assumption. If this feature is going to help us boost our revenue, repeat guest retention, improve lifetime value, if we're gonna have this big success with our bulk credits feature, what's something that we might be assuming for that to go right? Drop that in the chat. And you don't need to give me the basis impact, just stay off the top of your head. What could be an assumption that's important in the make or break success of this feature reaching our goals that may or may not be proven? Customers are loyal and stay on the platform. That is a good one, Tessa. We could be assuming that, are you talking? Yeah, so we could be assuming that those credits are going to be like motivation for retention, right? And coming back. But if someone doesn't care what platform they book on, or maybe they book certain things for an event, use a different website for a studio to shoot a video or something like that, we're making a pretty big assumption there that they're going to put it all in the Peerspace basket, right? And if they don't, and they're not committed to it, or they want to use a bunch of different platforms, or hosts want to use different platforms as Airbnb, VRBO type things do, that's a big assumption. Great. Jillian said customers only want to book recurring sessions for a short time. Yeah, we have to get the package in terms of, that's a great one, Jillian. Not just the discounts, but how many credits do people actually want to buy? Is this something that they're hosting one event a month and it's regular enough? Is that regular enough that they would want to prepay and save on that? Let's see, but I said the venues are open to increasing the frequency of booking. Absolutely, right? I like that one. And I like that you guys have some assumptions that are on the venues or the host side, right? We might be making an assumption that hosts want this. We might be making an assumption that they have the availability or the coordination or the resources to lock in somebody for session rentals for the next month or 6 months or something like that, right? A lot that we could probably factor into that one. Great. So again, our demo scenario here, we don't know all the specifics, but the way you guys are thinking about this is exactly right. Some of the ideas here, you can check through these, but giving you the scope of, hey, what are the assumptions? And with stakeholders, a lot of times these are going to be more than they expected at the beginning, right? There are actually a lot of things that we need to go right for this to work, right? Let's make some other high impact ones. All right, guys. So let me show you the finale of this, and we'll wrap up in the next couple of minutes. After you've put all of this stuff in, I created this generate report. So what this does is distills all of this information in here to a bottom line, right? We've put all our opportunities, we've given the context of this decision, we've put as many of the costs as accurately as we could, and we've listed some of the big assumptions, right? Some of the things that need to go right, and maybe some of the unproven stuff that could make or break the success of this feature. This report takes all of that into account and creates a simple readout that is meant to be used to evaluate the ROI of research, not as this vague thing that we should do, but as a way to de-risk an expensive decision. So our decision, launch a bulk hour credit system, 130K commitment. That's just from some of the numbers in there, with 6 opportunities, 9 assumptions before we build. Now we've got a nice readout here of our opportunities and our cost. Again, the idea here is vaguely pass over what's going into this and just have our eyes on the prize, but to really take a hard look and be able to show black and white what opportunities exist and what are the costs that are going into this. What's the potential upside and what's the cost, whether that's monetary or time, right? Down here is the last part of the report, which is where we get to what this whole workshop is about, the ROI of research. So what we're seeing down here are the assumptions that were defined as high risk, right? Things that are important, high impact, things that need to go right that are not yet validated. So this one here, a 15% discount is compelling enough to drive pre-commitment. This is important. We have to get this right. That has to be true for this to be a success. Here's the opportunity to de-risk this and the cost of research. You could run a preference test on Lyssna. This is just a recommendation of research you could do on Lyssna. You could show participants a couple versions of the credit pack at different levels, ask which they'd be most likely to act on and why, and or create some kind of survey where we can get that discount threshold and either verify that, yes, 15% is enough for people to commit. That is compelling enough for them to say, I want to buy 10 hours instead of 2. Or maybe to invalidate that and say, hey, we need to provide a 25% discount. That's really what people are saying is the motivation for them to, where they would pay more upfront. If that's the case, that is a really important thing to know before committing to this big decision. Now, the final important is the cost of this. I didn't go too far into the math and the logic behind this, more of estimates of what it would cost to do that research, the return. A test like this, a study like this on Lyssna, $110 to recruit participants. That is a rough estimate, but for 40 participants in 2 days, you could have an answer on this, right? You could have a real feedback from real users on that threshold. What discount percentage is actually compelling enough for them to buy more hours upfront? So what you get with this whole thing is a bottom line, right? You're making this big decision to build a feature. It's going to have a cost, a lot of costs of time and money. It's going to have opportunities and things that can be a great business impact if they go right. But you have a bunch of these assumptions that can make or break the success of this. That's the first step in being able to articulate the ROI of research, is setting up that scenario. this is a big decision, and there are a bunch of stuff that need to go right that we don't really know about yet. And that ends with, that's then articulated or shown a solution with stuff like this. When you see this in a more simplified report, the idea is to frame this research as a no-brainer, right? For $150, again, these are all made up numbers, but a decision like this, $110 to validate that discount amount that people are willing to pay for bulk hours for a potentially $500,000 swing either way with this decision is nothing, right? But this is actually this is real, right? This is a realistic budget to produce a study on Lyssna, source the people that you're looking for, and get real feedback and have a definitive answer to that question that you can move forward with, rather than just treating it as something you should look at or glossing over it as something that you already assume to be true. So to wrap here, the idea is to give you guys a tool to put all of this information in, to really tally up everything that goes into each decision, and to produce a simple report that shows those assumptions that could make or break this decision and the cost to eliminate them, right? All these unproven assumptions are risks. They're all things that pose a risk to the business success of this initiative or any that you're doing. But when it's quantified as the cost and how simple, quickly, and cost efficiently you can learn these things, especially with Lyssna, this becomes much more compelling, hopefully, for your stakeholders. The idea is you could show this and say, hey, we've got this big decision and we can eliminate a bunch of these possible landmines for a couple $100 and be sure that those risky things we actually know from our users, not just based on our long meetings together. Cool. All right. So let me wrap, guys. Thanks for sticking with me. If you're still here, let me check the chat. Cool. So the couple things on this. You guys can try this out for yourself. You've got the link for it. It's a work in progress, but I think the framework can be effective. I really want to hear from you guys as you use it on your own product decisions, either yourself or collaboratively with your team. So check it out, put your own stuff into it, play around with it. I'm going to be improving some of these in the future. This is my main area to work on. So I encourage you to try this. I hope it's a helpful tool for you to communicate the return on investment, quantify, and get out of the vague, confusing research land and into the importance of research as a black and white business decision, something compelling you can bring to your team. But of course, I welcome all suggestions. So if you're using this, you can fill that out as much as you want. Drop a quick comment in there and let me know what we can do to take this even further. Thank you, guys. I hope you enjoyed this workshop. Thanks for all the great input. Check out the tool, claim that promo code, and I'll be sending a follow-up with links, recording, all the stuff from today's workshop. You can feel free to respond to, stay in touch with me, or check out when it comes time for you to make a business case for research in the future. Other than that, have a great day, everybody, and hopefully I'll see you on another workshop soon. All right, see you.